Good afternoon and welcome to Medill Newsmakers. I'm Carolyn Freundlich. Today we will be talking about sustainable agriculture. Not only is it important for the environment, but it has many health benefits as well. Most food produced in the U.S. is not grown or raised on sustainable farms. Instead, our food system is mainly industrialized. It's reliant on harmful resources like synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides. These inputs are damaging to communities, farm workers, and consumers. A sustainable way of life is becoming more popular, though, as more people learn about the harmful effects of institutional agriculture. Chicago chef Humar Cantu also manages an indoor farm at his restaurant Moto. He not only emphasizes local food in his cuisines, but experiments with various sustainable food sources as well.
We have two indoor farmers, all they do is do this. And so we create vermicompost. That's this right here. Like, even if it's from a local farm, grow it at the local farm, you gotta package it, you gotta handle it, you gotta move it, you gotta refrigerate it, you gotta do all this stuff. We designed this just for this space. It increases the nutrient levels in the water. So when you go to the store or you buy any sort of fertilizer, that stuff, the nutrient value is very low. This is fresh. You know, plants are like humans, they want to eat their food fresh. Behind this glass window, we've got our heating and cooling. It produces a lot of CO2 and carbon monoxide. The plants love breathing that in. The key to what we do at Moto is really taking the available price performance increase in technology and marrying it with food.
A food and science professor at the University of Delaware, Carl Schmidt, has been working on developing sustainable food sources. He says heat-resistant breeds of farm animals will be essential to feeding the world population as global warming unfolds.
By 2050, we got to feed 9 billion people. And in order to do that, we have to increase productivity. And we're probably going to have to increase productivity in the face of a changing climate. We need to fund these projects, kind of projects now, because as you probably deduce from the time frame I'm describing, the actual impact might not be for 15 years out. And of course, that's when things are probably that's probably when we'll need them in many respects. So you have funding that's trying to anticipate these long-term needs. And I know under the same funding effort, there was actually a fair amount of funding effort that went into the engineering side of agriculture. And there, a lot of that money is trying to go into reduction of the impact of agriculture on the environment, lowering methane emissions, increasing or improving the ability of, for example, to deal with swine manure, bovine manure, those kinds of things. So in my experience, really what's coming out of this is, at least the U.S. Department of Agriculture is trying to address both the needs of the organism to survive this changing climate, but also the need of agriculture to reduce its footprint on the environment, to increase the sustainability in that way. There, I think the big impact is going to be, in terms of impact on the environment, is actually going to be continuing to get these incremental levels in increase in feed efficiency. And not just in chicken, but in some of the other animals that we consume. The chicken is probably one of the best in turning feed into chicken. And now I guess I wonder if some of the improvements we've seen in poultry, are there ways we can extrapolate to increase efficiency in other animals? And then you have a concordant decrease in the environmental impact because you're literally hauling a lot less feed around. Frankly, to minimize the impact, is to increase the bird's ability to turn feed into chicken, okay? Feed efficiency. And that's because one of the biggest impacts in terms of poultry production in a industrial scale agriculture is hauling feed to the chicken, okay? So any decrease in feed consumption while maintaining yield is going to reduce fuel consumption and feed consumption. So just by way of example, one of the things we're looking at are the use of probiotics in chickens, so kind of like yogurt for chicken, okay? And there are a lot of groups looking at this. And it appears as if the probiotic increases just slightly the feed efficiency of the chicken, okay? But when you actually do the math and extrapolate the impact we see here out over 565 million chickens, it turns out that's around over 600 cars, railroad cars of feed, less that they would need. So a small change or shift in feed efficiency can have a big impact, frankly, on the deleterious impact of any agriculture on the environment. So by trying to increase feed efficiency, we're trying to reduce the impact of poultry production on the environment.
Up next, manager of Pushing the Envelope Farm, Catherine Ray, will join us with insight on what it means to live sustainably and how a diet of farm to table changed her life.
Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here.
Go you Northwestern, go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Why hang around waiting for opportunity to knock when instead you can track opportunity down and knock on its door? You might ask, what's the best way to identify where opportunity lives? Here's a hint. Its door is colored purple. Northwestern University. Opportunity awaits your knock.
Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here. Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here.
We're back with Catherine Ray, farm manager of Pushing the Envelope Farm. She truly lives and breathes sustainability in Geneva, which is a small town about 40 miles west of Chicago. Since going organic, she eats only what she grows, eggs from her chickens, and milk and cheese from her 2 goats, Bagel and Miso. Ray says she's never felt healthier. Catherine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why did you initially decide to live a sustainable lifestyle?
So living a sustainable lifestyle to me means a number of things, and I've always really felt protective of nature. I've always enjoyed being outside. When I was a kid, I spent like all of my out of school hours playing outside with my friends. And in the town that I grew up in, I remember seeing like large areas of forest, really diverse ecosystems go from productive and beautiful to being developed for homes. And I know that's important, but when I was growing up and I saw that happen, I made the decision to become a person who would have like a lower impact on the environment. And to me that meant growing my own food and getting off of the group energy grid and lessening my carbon footprint any way that I could see being feasible for me. So when I was in high school, I kind of birthed this idea of becoming a homesteader when I grow up, which to me meant moving to an area, probably a rural area, living off the grid, growing my own food, having animals, and kind of doing that home economy thing where you ideally produce everything that you consume and any of your waste is put into producing a different product. And it also just happens to be something that I love. I love gardening. I've always loved being outside, so it was a really natural fit. And the idea also of managing a system like that and getting all of my exercise and fresh air from being in relationship to the plants and animals that are sustaining me seemed really beautiful. And so that's what sparked my interest initially.
Let's talk a little bit about sustainable farming and the benefits for a person's health. Have you noticed any physical difference since you started just eating, organic and what you grow? And
Yeah, so I've been farming on a large scale for 3 years now. And before that, I grew up in a very suburban town outside of New York City. So my parents never fed us vegetables. Sorry to my parents if they're gonna ever see this, but when I was 7 years old, I was served a pepper at a friend's house, and I didn't know what it was. And I was like, "What's this?" And they were like, "Oh, it's a pepper." And I was like, "What's a pepper?" And they were like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what that is." So going in these last 3 years to eating mostly vegetables, and then in this last year eating, exclusively greens and squashes and just, eggs from the chickens and milk from the goats has had major impact on my health. I didn't realize how healthy I could feel until I moved to the farm. In my late teens and early 20s, I started developing a lot of health issues. I remember I was getting migraines, I was getting serious amounts of acne, which I had never had as a younger person, and lots of pain and a whole bunch of different things that kept coming up. And I would go to the doctor and, be told that it wasn't a problem, that kind of thing. When I started working on the farm, being outside, getting a lot of exercise and eating healthier, some of those things started decreasing. And then when I made a rule to stop eating a lot of the foods that I grew up eating, so no more potato chips, no more cookies, things like that, I'd say 90% of the problems that I was having went away.
And can we talk a little bit about the food that your animals produce? What is the difference, I guess, in the nutrients that your goats and your chickens produce versus something that would come from, a factory animal?
So the most important difference to me is that the chicken eggs and the goat milk are both free of some of the hormonal toxins that are present in more industrialized food systems, and that's something that I've noticed has a real obvious effect on my health. If I eat milk from a cow that's been fed, for example, corn and soy, for an extended period of time, I'll get acne, I'll get a whole bunch of other stuff. I can eat the goat's milk, and it does nothing. It's a really healthy, beneficial thing to me. So in the industrial system, most cows, chickens, all actually livestock are fed a combination of maybe 10 different grains. It's usually corn, it's soy. Soy accounts for the protein. There's wheat, and then there's probably some other protein mixes and different sources of carbohydrates. The one that's been particularly problematic for me is the soy, and our animals are fed organic, soy-free feed stuff, so they get that, and they also get anything that they can find from being free range. we have chickens, they have the access of our whole site. So they dig up worms, they kind of, scratch around in the dirt and find the things they can find. And the goats get taken for walks regularly, so they eat the roughage on the trees and things like that. And then they get grass hay. So in addition to not having the soy, there's also not the same amount of pesticides in the foods that are produced from our goats and our chickens, because the foods that they're eating aren't being grown with the pesticides. And again, that's important to me hormonally, because many of the industrial pesticides are actually hormonal disruptors. It's part of the way many of them work. So when they spray pesticides, for example, like Roundup, that's a hormonal disruptor. And many times the pesticide is designed to disrupt the hormones of the plant that it's targeting. So Roundup, for example, is a broadleaf herbicide. It'll kill, most broadleaf plants. And I'm not sure exactly how that one works, but we are very closely related to the insects and the plants that are being targeted by herbicides and pesticides. For example, we have somewhere like between 96 and 98% of our DNA identical to oak trees. And if you think about oak trees and then you think about everything else, the pesticides that are being used on our industrial fields that are targeting these plants and animals have similar effects in our body. So to me, it's really important to not have them in the food that's fed to my animals and then that I end up eating.
Thanks so much. I know you'll be sticking around, and I look forward to hearing more. When we return, we will speak with a student who has been studying the issue of sustainability while working on various assignments.
Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here.
Go you Northwestern, Northwestern break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Why hang around waiting for opportunity to knock when instead you can track opportunity down and knock on its door? You might ask, what's the best way to identify where opportunity lives? Here's a hint. Its door is colored purple. Northwestern University. Opportunity awaits your knock.
Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here. Why spend your entire life looking for some on-ramp to the road to opportunity when there's already a well-traveled path? So you may be wondering, what does that path look like? Is it paved with gold? Well, here's a hint. It's actually paved with purple. Northwestern University. Your road starts here.
Eva Voynigescu is a graduate journalism student at Northwestern University. Eva has reported extensively on sustainable agriculture, and she's here to tell us more. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm curious, what is the difference between organic and natural?
So the way I understand it from the research that I've done, organic really means that whatever food you're looking at, and when you're looking at packaged foods in the grocery stores, hasn't used antibiotics in its growth or synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. So that compares to natural, which actually, and most people don't know this, natural actually means that the foods that you read on the label, the ingredients that you read on the label, you're not going to see those things that you can't pronounce and you have no idea what they are. It means no additives, no preservatives, things that you would naturally find out there. That's what natural foods are. So, it's hard to say whether organic or natural is healthier for you. It really depends on what you're looking for from your food, and it really depends on the food in question. You might want a packaged good that doesn't have a ton of additives in it, so you might not really care that it's not organic because everything that's on that list is natural.
That's true, yeah. I would agree with the health statements on that. In addition, as somebody who's learning to read packages, I had a period where I said I can eat anything that's organic, no matter what it is, doesn't matter at all, and I would pick it up and there'd be like 40 grams of sugar and all this fat per serving, and I'd be like, great, I'm gonna eat it, it's organic, it doesn't have any synthetic pesticides in it. But Eva is right in terms of whether it's organic or natural, looking at the food and determining whether it's really not appropriate for your health at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of large corporations are now offering organic foods. What does that really mean? Does it mean that our culture is becoming more aware, more sustainable?
I think it's definitely becoming more important to people to know where their food is coming from and how it was raised or how it was grown and produced, because they're realizing that this does have an effect on their health, like Kate was saying. And that does mean that it's spreading into places like Target and Walmart, which are starting to sell organic products. But when it comes to that, and I'm not really sure where their products are sourced from, you have to think that there is a difference in a product you get at Target versus a product that you get at your neighborhood farmer's market, where you meet the farmer and he has a small farm and he can tell you exactly how he grew that product and how it came to market. Whereas with Target, they are serving so many people in such large numbers that their food may still be coming from thousands of miles away. It may still have been picked, 2 weeks earlier than it would have been picked by your farmer's market farmer. So that affects the nutrient quality of the food.
That's true, and what I would add to that is recently in the organic world, a lot of the guidelines have been a little bit watered down. So I know traditionally organic meant no synthetic pesticides or fertilizers or herbicides. And these days, actually, I just was reviewing the guidelines. It means no synthetics, except for these synthetics that we've approved. Only organic seeds when available, that kind of thing. So what Eva was saying about really knowing your farmer, going out and meeting the farmer, and that being a more reliable source of a high quality food, I think is really important. The people that are in the alternative sustainable farming movement currently, the young organic farmers or more established organic farmers, are people that have made it in general, their life's passion and their life's work to alter the food supply system. And they're people that it's really important to have a high quality product. We have a farmer on our site who measures each of his crops with something called a Brix tester, and it's a tester that measures the nutrient density of the plant. So he's making sure that everything that he grows has the highest amount of nutrients inside that plant that's possible given his situation, and he runs a CSA, so that's another great way. Going an alternative route and joining something like the CSA is another great way to make sure that you're getting food that's really high quality if you're looking for something maybe outside of more traditional like Target or Walmart or a system like that.
And then that helps decrease your footprint like we were talking about, because your food's coming from closer by rather than far away. And a lot of these companies like Target and Walmart have all sorts of other practices that are not necessarily sustainable that you won't get when you get your food from a local farmer's market or from a CSA.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk a little bit about raw milk? I know there's some discussion and some debate over the health, and I know that you at your farm, do you have raw milk? So what is the debate over raw milk?
So I've actually done a little bit of research and work on this, and essentially what raw milk is unpasteurized milk. So it hasn't been heated to a very high temperature to kill the bacteria in it. But people who are supporters of raw milk and like drinking raw milk believe that it has all sorts of health benefits. There's proteins and enzymes and other things in the milk that maybe prevent asthma, prevent allergies or digestive issues. And this might be the case. Unfortunately, there's been no scientific studies to definitively prove this, but there are lots of people out there with their own stories about how it's improved their life, similar to Kate's. So there's that side of the argument, but it's very heavily regulated, in some places all outright banned, because there is a higher risk with raw milk of getting salmonella or E. coli or other types of bacteria and parasites from that milk because it hasn't been pasteurized. So even though the risk is, marginally worse, because public health departments are charged with keeping the public healthy, and they have such a responsibility to do it in a way where they're keeping everybody healthy, they have to ban these things because there is a higher risk, however marginal it might be, and they simply don't have the resources to monitor it on a case-by-case basis. Of course, there's also the factor that there's companies that produce milk already, and there's economic benefits to them not being threatened by smaller farmers who are selling raw milk, which is very popular among a certain segment of people who are supporters of raw milk. It can go for as much as $10 a gallon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. It does. It can be quite expensive. I've heard even to $16 a gallon in our area. One thing that I'd like to actually talk about in terms of raw milk, which is a little bit different than the health benefits of raw milk, is kind of access to food and food rights, because that's something that's become more important to me and grown in my field of awareness since I've been farming. And what I mean by that is, do you have the right to grow your own food? Do you have the right to eat what you want to eat? If there is a higher risk, do you have the right to assume that risk as an individual? And I think that these are important questions, and they're questions that a lot of the young organic growers have been dealing with. For example, one way, so we don't sell raw milk on my farm, and that's in part because of the health risk or the perceived health risk, and in part because it's difficult legally to sell it. If you are going to be selling raw milk in the state of Illinois, I believe the customer has to come to your establishment with their own container. You have to fill their container from your bulk container, and then they take it away, they drink it. But you're not allowed to advertise, and you're not allowed to sell off your site, I don't think. So that puts up a large wall for people that are trying to produce and sell, and it also makes it really difficult for people who are actively looking for a raw milk product to find a producer, because they're not allowed to advertise. So, I guess people end up going to farmers markets asking around, that kind of thing. But it does, to me, signal a question of, well, if somebody's really looking for this, is that they're right. It's our right in our country to smoke cigarettes if we want to. Should it be a right to have raw milk products? And one of the ways that people legally get around that is there are things called cow shares or goat shares. You purchase a share of the goat. So the farmer will take care of the goat, milk the goat, provide the milk, but the farmer doesn't own the goat, and that's a way to make it legal for you to have access to raw milk.
And the large debate is between rights and between the government's responsibility to keep you healthy, and balancing, your freedom to choose what food you eat and their responsibility to keep everybody healthy. And this particularly comes into play when you're talking about what they call vulnerable people, like small children and pregnant women and the elderly, because they're more likely to get sick from raw milk than people our age are. And they don't have a choice. It's particularly young children. They're being fed this milk by a mom who thinks it's healthy and maybe isn't aware of the risks, however small they may be, and then they have a higher risk of getting sick. So I think that there's definitely something to be said for having a choice in your food, but I can see why it's a problem for regulators who have to find this balance.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you both for joining me, and thank you for tuning in. Join us next time on Medill Newsmakers. I'm Carolyn Freundlich.